Welcome to Observations, an open conversation about women's health. This is a space where physicians, patients, and other experts can sit down and have honest, evidence-based dialogue that cuts through the media bias and brings clarity back to maternal care and how we can care for both patients, mother and preborn child. With each episode, we will have real stories, real science, but also real questions about women's health today. From clinical insights to lived experiences, to aligned perspectives, and yes, also respectful disagreements. This is our goal, to bridge the gap between physician and patient, to empower informed decision-making, and bring back and elevate compassionate, fact-driven care. Now, a quick note before we dive in. Not every guest on the podcast is going to represent the views or positions of AppLog, but we believe that having open and honest conversations are going to make us better. So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get into today's observation.
Hi there, I'm your host for today, Dr. Christina Francis, CEO of AppLog, the American Association of Pro-Life OB-GYNs. Today, I'm so excited to welcome a friend of mine and an incredible pro-life leader, David Bereit. David is a strategic advisor for many high-impact nonprofit and ministry organizations. He's been a mentor for young ministry leaders, and he's the founder and former CEO of 40 Days for Life, which many of you will have heard of. He's also a webcast expert, which I can attest to, who has hosted hundreds of online events with audiences as large as, is this right, 36,000 people?
The biggest was right at 40,000 people.
Wow,
That was
pretty amazing. That's right. David is also currently serving as the executive director of the Life Leadership Conference, a group that AppLog is very proud to be a part of. David, thank you so much for joining us on Observations and for being here at your first ever MBAC, our national conference. We're so excited to have you.
Dr. Francis, Christina, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor and blessing to be at the conference and then to be able to sit down and talk with you.
Absolutely.
I admire not only your leadership, but the work of AppLog more than I can express in words.
Well, thank you so much. David, you started and led the global 40 Days for Life movement through its first decade, mobilizing 750,000 volunteers in more than 700 cities across all 50 states and dozens of nations as well. Those volunteers' prayers and their efforts saved over 14,000 children's lives, which is really amazing, and brought 177 workers out of the abortion industry, as well as closing almost 100 abortion centers, I think, during your tenure, which is really, really amazing.
Yeah.
I know that you interdigitated with the medical profession before you started 40 Days for Life. I believe you were a pharmaceutical rep.
I was a drug dealer. That's correct.
That's right. So what led you to leave that job and start 40 Days for Life?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. Well, it was frustration. It was prayer. And also it was an OB-GYN. Let me explain them. Frustration. When Planned Parenthood opened a local abortion center in our town, I was heartbroken, thinking children are going to die in my town on my watch. Women are going to be harmed in my town on my watch. But I didn't know what could I do. I was scared. I felt powerless.
Sure.
So I just wanted to sit on the sidelines, even though I felt this conviction, something needs to be done. But my wife grew up in a pro-life home in Corpus Christi, Texas. She and her family used to go out and pray outside abortion centers in Corpus Christi. And over a period of years, they saw every single abortion center in that city close its doors as Christians were there as a peaceful witness. So when she said, David, we need to be involved, wives can be very convincing. And so I said, okay, maybe I'm supposed to be involved. So the frustration then led to a sense of maybe I'm supposed to be involved. I ultimately started to volunteer with the local pro-life group called the Coalition for Life, and that was where we started 40 Days for Life. But the prayer piece of it was one day praying about the fact that abortions were happening, children were being killed, women were being harmed, and just this deeper conviction that we're not doing enough. We were doing good things, but we weren't doing enough. And that was when the conviction came that we need to do something very significant. And we felt led to align with the 40-day timeline in scripture that God uses over and over again to bring about transformation. And we wanted to see some transformation. And the three activities that we felt led to do were prayer and fasting, peaceful vigil, and community outreach. Those three things for a 40-day period. Now, I was still scared. I didn't really want to do this, but I felt that God had given us a clarion call. But I mentioned an obstetrician gynecologist,
Yeah.
Dr. Royal Benson, one of my greatest heroes, God rest his soul. I was wrestling with my work in the pharmaceutical industry that I was doing and I was very good at, but I also felt this increasing sense of calling to do pro-life work full time in the midst of all of this. And so I went and met with the board chair of this pro-life group, Dr. Royal Benson, an OB-GYN. And Dr. Benson said, David, we need you to do this. He said, I'm an obstetric gynecologist doctor. I can't do it. I can't, by all. I will help. Others in the community will help. But if you're willing, we think you have the gifts, the talents, the skills. I'll walk with you. We'll partner. And so Dr. Benson Royal is the one who convinced me to quit my job in the pharmaceutical industry and take this leap of faith to go into nonprofit pro-life work. And I am forever grateful because there would never have been a 40 Days for Life. I would never be sitting here talking to you if it weren't for a doctor who lived out his pro-life convictions. And he didn't just tell me to do it. He walked with me every step of the way. And Dr. Benson was there when I quit my job and I lost my company car. He bought me a car, a used car to do this. He was willing to support me. And then we worked hand in hand as year one, we saw abortions go down in our town 2%. The next year, 15%, the next year, 28%. And because of what Royal invited me into and that he was willing to walk with me, and as a pro-life OB-GYN, we saw that abortion center close its doors and go out of business. So God is so amazingly good. And I'm thankful that that frustration turned into action. I'm thankful that that prayer turned into trusting God. And I'm thankful for a pro-life OB-GYN who said, David, let's do this together.
Yeah, so amazing. I had no idea actually that there was an OB-GYN that had been involved in the beginnings of 40 Days for Life. So that's really, really special to me, obviously, as an OB. And also just as you were telling your story, I heard a lot of similarities actually between your story and how I got involved in the pro-life movement. And I think those similarities are, again, a frustration, or for me, it was really I think truly realizing the devastation of abortion to my preborn patients, but also my maternal patients as well. And then not really knowing what I was going to do about it, but making myself available and being passionate and just saying, I'll do whatever it is that I need to do. And for me, that was getting involved with AppLog, and then it kind of went from there. But so just really neat to hear similar stories. And I think that could be hopefully an encouragement to anybody who's watching this to know that you don't have to have a firm plan in place necessarily ahead of time. If you make yourself available and are just willing to do the hard work sometimes to help defend life, you just never know what might happen.
You know, I live by that saying that God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Absolutely.
And if any of us knew what this calling would look like, we would probably run screaming to the hills.
Right.
But I'm so thankful that one by one, as different people say yes to the Lord, as you've done, Christina, so beautifully, I look at the profound impact that has in the countless lives that are being saved as a result. And I hope that's an encouragement to everybody who's right now thinking, what's my next step? What am I supposed to do? How can I say yes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you just bring up such an important point too, that you may not have all the tools that you need or feel like you have all the tools that you need or the answers right now, but those will be provided as you take a step out in faith. So David, I know as part of your work with 40 Days for Life, you often were outside of abortion facilities, and I've done that some, not near to the extent that you have, but I know sort of the sense of desperation I felt as I watched women walk into that clinic, knowing what they were going in there to do, knowing that their babies' lives were going to be ended, and knowing that they very likely were going to be harmed in some way, certainly at least mentally, if not physically, through that abortion process. And that feeling of almost desperation of what can I do to help her or stop her from going in there. I think it would be really beneficial for the people that listen and watch this podcast to hear from you about some of those experiences. What are stories maybe that you heard from women, reasons that they gave for why they were going in to have abortions?
Yeah. So 40 Days for Life was made up of three components. It was prayer and fasting, because we know that ending abortion on our own, we can't do it, but with God, all things are possible. It was a peaceful vigil outside of these abortion centers, and also community outreach. So those were the three components. The peaceful vigil, being outside of those places, it's it's a very heavy experience for
Mhm.
any of us.
Yeah.
Those of us who recognize that the child within a mother's womb is human, made in God's image and likeness. Those of us who know that this decision is going to come with a lifetime of regrets.
Mhm.
And so when I first started to go out there, and I went very reluctantly, I didn't want to go, but my wife said, David, we need to go. And there was that convincing bride once again.
Hmm.
And when I first went, it just brought me to tears because I was thinking, here are people who are in such a hopeless, helpless situation. They feel they have no other option. And Planned Parenthood orchestrates what they do, as do other abortion providers, surgical abortion providers, where they put the door way back behind gates and they have escorts that are there to drown out what sidewalk counselors or other people would potentially say to them. But watching those cars pull in on the abortion days, and sometimes it would be 10, sometimes it would be 20, and realizing that's a classroom of children that are perishing in my town today. But then also realizing those women are so desperate, those moms are so desperate that they don't feel they have any other choice.
Mhm.
And in talking with some of them, and rarely were we able to interact very much beforehand
Mm.
because the Planned Parenthood orchestrated so much to try to squelch what we were doing. Sometimes just the presence. We saw people who would turn around and leave just because they saw people praying, and it was enough to be convicted. And people telling us later, I was praying for a sign and you were my sign, the people who are out there.
Yeah.
But those who do go in, when they come out, you see a shell of the person who walked in at that moment. You see them carrying the same little bag of different things that Planned Parenthood sends them home with. And you just see this empty expression and this sense of going from desperation to almost a sense of despair.
Yeah.
And in talking with some of those women, then you realize just how much they need hope and healing, and how much we, as whether it's the body of Christ or people who are pro-life in our convictions, we need to demonstrate to them through our words and our actions
Yeah.
there are other opportunities, there are other choices, there are better solutions. So we're the last sign of hope for them when they're going in, but also we can be the last sign, the first sign of mercy for them when they're coming out. One thought that really struck me, and it was really affirmed recently when the abortion industry released their Turnaway study,
Mhm.
where they were looking at women who had had abortions, trying to show that, oh, they were all fine with this. And when you really dug into the data, you found that 6 out of 10 women who had abortions said if one person
Mhm.
had been willing to help them. If they had had any real practical support, they would never have had the abortion. They didn't want the abortion. That's why our presence is so important there.
Right.
And that's why it's so important that we have better alternatives, not just on the sidewalk, as important as that is,
Right.
but then healthcare that can actually support and walk with them in the midst
Right.
of an unexpected pregnancy. But we have to really stand up, we have to rise up, and we have to live out our pro life convictions, not just say them.
Absolutely. So important. And what you said about how the women looked when they came out of the abortion facility. I witnessed that once when I was outside of an abortion facility, but I've also witnessed it in my own office when women came back after choosing to have abortions. And many times were very upset about it, very tearful, very much regretting the decision that they'd made. I think you raise a good point because so often for physicians, we are taught in our training that you are to be non-directive in your counseling of patients, that you need to present information in an unbiased way. And while yes, our job is to provide all of the information at our fingertips to our patients, I think you provide a very good reason why it's okay in this situation to be somewhat directive with
Right.
patients. Because when we as physicians, when a woman comes in and she's thinking that she wants an abortion, if we don't put up any roadblocks at all, or even not even a roadblock, even just say, my routine was I would just say, tell me what it is that makes you think that's the right decision for
Mhm.
you, and let's talk about that. Um, when all you do is say, okay, here's the number for Planned Parenthood, then she's going to go and get that abortion. But maybe she's one of those 6 in 10 women who don't actually want that abortion. She just wants someone to say, you can do this,
Right.
and let's help find you the support that you need to do this.
And you make an excellent point about, is it being directive? Well, when they go to Planned Parenthood, all they're getting is direction. Everything is
Such a
steering
good
them
point.
towards one outcome, and that is a dead child and a mother with a life of regrets. And much of the world, so many of the women going in, when we would be able to talk to them, either before in the rare cases or afterwards, they would say, everyone in my life is encouraging or coercing, pressuring me to have this abortion. So if the whole world is being directive and we're trying to be passive, we have to be willing to say, there is a better option and there is help, there is support. And like you said, find out, get to the underlying cause. It's not just to say what you're wanting to do is bad and I have this good solution. It's to find what's the underlying cause. How can we address that root cause to really try to alleviate the entire situation? And then for that woman to know somebody loves her, actually provides compassion and care rather than just the sales pitch for abortion she'll get at Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it's not being directive or biased to say, I want what's best for you as my patient, not only my maternal patient, but of course, we want what's best for our preborn patient as well. When we offer her other solutions, that's actually what we're getting at is we don't want you to go through this because we know the impact that it's going to have on you, but we also want to come alongside of you. And I know we have so many pregnancy center member organizations of APLOG, and the work that they are doing then to come alongside of women and support them is so, so crucial as well. Um, when you were interacting with women outside of abortion facilities or just in your work that you do in general in the pro-life movement, how important do you think that it is that we have pro-life medical professionals? I know you think it's important, but talk to our listeners and our viewers about the what you see as the head of Life Leadership Conference, as someone who's been involved in this movement for so many years now. How important is it that we have not only life-affirming healthcare available to people, but have medical professionals who are willing to speak up on the issue of life?
Yeah. Well, one of the early things that happened in College Station, Texas, where we were starting up 40 Days for Life, was when Planned Parenthood came to town, a lot of faith-based and pro-life physicians said, this is not a good thing. And one physician, he's actually here at MBEC,
Mhm.
he actually went around throughout the medical community and he said, all right, are you willing to sign something that we're going to put in the local paper saying, if somebody needs medical care, they think Planned Parenthood is their only option, you will provide the medical care regardless of their ability to pay for everything but abortion.
Mhm.
And he ended up getting dozens of doctors to put their name in the newspaper saying, we're here for you.
Mhm.
That was game changing because all of a sudden the community knew there are doctors who were willing to live out the Hippocratic Oath, who were willing to live out their pro-life convictions and put their money where their mouth was,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
So that really first demonstrated to me. But as I think about the importance of pro-life doctors, there's several different facets. We could spend far more time than we have today to
Sure.
talk about this. But number one is polling has shown, Life Leadership Conference, the beginning of last year, did a national poll to ask Americans, who do you trust to talk about the issue of abortion?
Mhm.
And of all the people that were surveyed, the least trusted voice on abortion was politicians. I know that shocks you.
Yeah, right.
The second least trusted voice on the issue of abortion was activists. So that rules me out of the equation. But when you go to the top of the list, the second most trusted voice when it comes to the topic of abortion was women with lived experience,
Mm.
because people empathize with somebody in a difficult situation
Absolutely.
and somebody who's been down that road to really speak from their experience. So that's the second most trusted voice. Number one, hands down, medical doctors,
Mm.
the most trusted authority. So when you look at APLOG doctors, you look at pro-life medical doctors,
Mhm.
you realize here are physicians that actually view two patients when someone is pregnant, the mother and the child. You have a physician who is willing to demonstrate life-affirming care and true compassion, show that support network in reality and be able to give the time. I mean, how do you change the culture? It's one exam room visit at a time, one conversation, and demonstrating that in person. So it's to the patient, it's to the pro-life movement, and then even the research that I've been doing recently on how does culture change, and particularly how do we get into the mess we have with abortion. It was because abortion shifted out of the realm of culture and morality into the realm of medicalization. And when medical elites began leaning into reframing the whole issue of, oh, it's a clinical decision rather than a moral decision, it completely changed the entire game. So now all of a sudden you've got, well, a doctor's always right. And, now it's a private issue. Doctors need to realize the authority, the importance that they have when they speak out on issues can change laws, it can change the public, it can change the media. So it's the patient you serve, it's providing that care for those in a time of need and having that authority that is going to shape this debate for the next generation.
Absolutely. So important. And doctors have been involved throughout history, actually, in helping shape pro-life policy. And you had an OB-GYN who was involved with you in getting 40 Days for Life started. The first pro-life laws in America were actually championed by Dr. Horatio Storer and other physicians. So we've been involved in this, and as you said, we've seen this shift in medicine because of the medical elites. In particular, I think at the tip of the spear was ACOG, the American College of OB-GYNs, whose leaders sort of did this top-down push of saying that abortion is healthcare, when before, actually, one of their leaders had said abortion is an attempt at fixing a social problem with a medical solution.
Mm.
And of course, it doesn't fix that problem,
Yes.
and it has no place in medicine. And, APLOG's position is that death is not a therapeutic modality, that it has no place in the practice of medicine. And so I agree. I think it's so important that doctors, especially now, especially in the time that we find ourselves in. So let's talk about that, actually. So we're in this sort of new era now for the pro-life movement since the Dobbs decision, which was a monumental thing, right? I mean, the whole pro-life movement worked in a coordinated fashion for 50 years to get the scourge of Roe v. Wade overturned. And that was amazing.
Yep.
Um, I've had people say, well, didn't your job get easier after Dobbs? And I said, it got exponentially harder. So we are now just in this very different time. One of our speakers this morning said that we're almost in a cultural civil war right now because you have this patchwork of pro-life laws across the country. So we're in this very different time. Can you tell us now, as the executive director of Life Leadership Conference, one, what is the Life Leadership Conference? Maybe we should have led with that. But then also, where do you see the movement right now? Because we find ourselves in a much different place now
Right.
since the Dobbs decision.
Okay, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So, Life Leadership Conference was born at the beginning of 2025 at a meeting that you were at and I was at, when a few dozen pro-life leaders got together to say, why are we losing more than we're winning in this post-Roe landscape that we're in, and discussing some of the things that you've just covered. And at that meeting, we all talked about some of the big challenges. We talked about the increase in the use of abortion pills and them being mailed. We talked about Planned Parenthood's funding that was continuing to grow. We talked about the cross-state traffic between the so-called red and so-called blue states. We talked about how pregnancy centers were coming under increasing attack, and the ballot initiatives where we had lost 14 out of 17 of those across the country. And throughout that meeting, one of the realizations that we all came to was part of the problem is we've all been operating in largely independent silos, independent, fragmented efforts, all important, but we haven't been communicating, we haven't been collaborating, we haven't been working together. And so Life Leadership Conference was formed to bring together pro-life leaders like you and me, pro-life organizations and pro-life philanthropists to strategize, to coordinate, and then to mobilize together to achieve greater wins together than we could independently. So the reason that's so important is because in this changed landscape, in this decentralized abortion climate we're in, we have to be more strategic. We have to think innovatively. We have to do things we haven't done before. So that's why Life Leadership Conference was birthed. And then immediately we started to look at what are some of the key issues: abortion pills, defunding Planned Parenthood, bolstering our pregnancy centers, some of the states, how do we coordinate that? And that's where we've been mobilizing quietly behind the scenes to coordinate and say, if we get everybody working together, we get good polling, we get good strategy, we get good messaging, we have a mobilization plan, we know who's going to be in which lane, and then we all deploy it, and we've achieved some wins together. So the thing that gives me hope is we've seen, in my view, of now 25 years in the pro-life movement, we've seen greater coordination and greater unity over this last year than I've ever seen, and I'm very thankful for that. The problem that we still face is we have a huge uphill battle, and we have to look at not just reacting to the latest political or legislative initiative, but we have to think, how do we change culture over the next 5, 10, 40 years so that we actually have a better, true culture of life for our children and grandchildren? So a lot of good things are happening on that front, and I'm more optimistic about the pro-life movement than I've been in decades. So it gives me great hope, but we still all need to work together, and it's an all hands on deck moment for sure.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, that gives me encouragement to hear you say that you're feeling good about the direction that we're going in. And again, APLOG is so excited to be a part of the Life Leadership Conference, a part of working together with other organizations. And really, I think, APLOG's new push this year of forging a new path forward in medicine towards life-affirming healthcare, restoring an ethic of life-affirming healthcare within the medical profession, I think fits so nicely in this. We're so excited to be working with you and so grateful to have you here. If you could just leave, I guess, us with one word of encouragement for our pro-life doctors and nurses and midwives that are out there that might be feeling very alone, what would you say to them as encouragement?
Well, I would say if you're not involved in AppLog, get involved in AppLog. It is a beautiful community where you won't be alone. You'll be with other like-minded, like-valued people who will love you. They'll stand with you. They'll support you. They'll have your back. And then also realize the urgency and importance of the work that you do. Sometimes day to day, when you're seeing patients, you're in the hospital, you may not realize the way that I am practicing medicine is literally changing the trajectory of history. If you live out your pro-life convictions in the way that you practice medicine. And then the last thing is find the ways right where you live. There are people that you can help. Maybe it's to go and pray at an abortion center, as crazy as that sounds. Maybe it's to get involved in offering help to those who are in trouble and have nowhere else to go. Even if it means you're taking a patient who can't pay, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's to help with your local pregnancy center. Maybe it's to help with political and legislative efforts. We need to do all of it. But I would just say my encouragement is there are amazing things happening. The future is incredibly bright, and that each of us have been called for such a time as this to do everything we can with the gifts, the talents, the experiences, the weaknesses that we each have, to deploy them in a way that will not only save lives, that will change American history and will build God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven.
Absolutely. Thank you, David, so much
You
for
bet.
being on Observations and for being here at the conference. We're so excited to have you. And if you want to know how you can better get involved with the work that AppLog is doing, you can go to applog.org/mobilize and then continue to follow us here on Observations. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Observations and that it broadened your perspective on women's health and how we can care for both patients, mother, and preborn child. If you like this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review where you can find your podcasts. Make sure that you like this on YouTube and subscribe to our channel for more episodes coming up. And if you have any suggestions on any topics that we should cover or guests that we should have on, make sure that you email us at media@applog.org. Again, thank you for joining us for today's observation, and we'll see you in our next episode.